I never imagined that cementing over what I thought were just a few illegal wells would unravel a web of lies buried deep within Summit Hollow Residences HOA. What started as an early morning confrontation quickly turned into a battle for my land, my legacy, and my sanity. It all began when I noticed a low rumble shaking my kitchen window. Coffee in hand, I stepped outside to find a massive drilling machine rumbling across the orchard I inherited from my Aunt Caroline just last year. Two men in hard hats were measuring the distance from my old fence, while a third marked the ground with neon orange spray paint. I blinked twice, thinking I was dreaming. But the machines were real, the men were real, and they were trespassing. "Hey," I shouted, jogging toward them. "What the hell do you think you're doing on my property?" The tallest one, calm as you like, glanced up and said, "Drilling a well, sir. Orders from Summit Hollow Residences HOA. A well? On my land. Who signed off on this?" I demanded. He pulled a folded set of papers from his vest. "Got all the permits right here." Sure enough, stamped at the top was the HOA's official logo. According to the document, they had permission to drill emergency wells along the eastern boundary of my 6-acre orchard. But I never signed anything. "This has to be a mistake," I said. "I didn't agree to this." "Not our problem," he shrugged. "We go where we're told." I inherited this land after Aunt Caroline passed away. It had been in our family for decades, long before Summit Hollow existed. I never joined the HOA. Why would I? My land isn't even inside their gated development. "You need to leave now," I told them firmly. One of them pulled out a phone. "We'll call the HOA president. She can explain." 20 minutes later, a sleek black SUV pulled up. A woman in her early 50s stepped out, her posture rigid, her sunglasses reflecting the rising sun. "Mr. Walker, I presume?" "I'm Denise Hallbrook, president of the Summit Hollow HOA," she said. No handshake offered. "Your men are trespassing," I snapped. Denise's smile was tight. "Actually, your aunt signed an easement agreement 10 years ago allowing access to the aquifer under your orchard in times of emergency." My stomach sank. "Emergency? What emergency?" "We're in a severe drought," she said smoothly, pulling out another document. "One well is allowed under Section 5, Paragraph 3. She wasn't lying. Her paper showed my aunt's signature. But something wasn't right. I glanced around and spotted more orange markers scattered across the orchard. "This says one well," I said. "Why are there at least 4 sites marked?" Denise waved a manicured hand. "The situation has evolved. Our legal team believes the spirit of the agreement permits multiple wells if needed." "That's not what it says." "Feel free to consult our lawyers," she replied, already turning back to her SUV. That night, I couldn't sleep. Floodlights glared from the orchard as workers drilled through the soil my aunt once tended. By dawn, they had completed one well and started on a second. I called the county water authority. No emergency had been declared. In fact, we were only in a voluntary conservation stage. That's when it clicked. Something was off. I drove through Summit Hollow, expecting dry lawns. Instead, sprinklers were running and landscapers were filling a pristine community pool. Then I saw the sign. "Coming soon, Suncrest Galleria and Wellness Plaza." I took photos. They weren't fighting a drought. They were building a shopping center. And they were stealing my water to do it. When I got home, I found more markers on my land, more rigs arriving. They weren't stopping. That was the moment I decided. If they wanted wells, they'd get concrete instead. The next night, with help from Logan Price, a buddy in construction, I filled the first well with heavy-duty concrete and scrap metal. I worked through the night, fueled by rage and desperation. The following mornings, I repeated the process for the second and third wells. Then, as I was prepping the fourth, Denise returned, flanked by HOA lawyers and fuming. "You'll regret this, Mr. Walker," she hissed. "No," I said, my hands coated in cement. "You will." And I meant it. Now I was really suspicious. I hopped in my truck and drove into Summit Hollow Residences to see for myself. If this community was truly in a water crisis, it sure didn't look like it. Every lawn I passed was lush and green. Sprinklers were running. A landscaping crew was even filling the community pool like it was just another sunny day. Then I saw it. The sign posted near the front gate. "Coming soon, Summit Hollow Luxury Water Features and Resident Lake." I slammed on the brakes and snapped a photo. This wasn't about survival. They wanted my water for decorative fountains and a man-made lake. By the time I got home, not one, not two, but 3 drilling teams were now spread out across my orchard. Pipes snaked through the grass, fresh holes marked with bright paint. And standing in my driveway, like he was supervising the whole thing, was Victor Alvarez. "Impressive project they're putting in," he said casually, watching a rig bore into my land. "You know about this?" I asked, barely holding back my frustration. Victor nodded. "Denise announced it at the last HOA meeting. Said they finally got permission to tap the aquifer for new community upgrades. With those features, property values are projected to jump at least 15%. My jaw clenched. She told me this was for an emergency water shortage. Victor chuckled. "Shortage of luxury, maybe. My wife Tanya is on the landscaping committee. They've been planning this for months." I thanked him through gritted teeth and stormed inside to call a lawyer. Samantha Reed agreed to see me that afternoon. After reviewing the paperwork I'd collected, her verdict was clear. They were blatantly violating the easement. "The agreement allows one well, for emergency use only," Samantha said, flipping through the documents. "You have grounds to stop them, but it won't be immediate. We'll need to file for an injunction. Could take a week or more." She leaned forward. "In the meantime, document everything. Take photos. Record conversations. Keep a detailed log." When I got home, I did exactly that. But what I saw made my blood run cold. 3 wells had already been completed, and now a 4th was in progress. Workers were laying thick pipes across my orchard, pipes that trampled through my garden beds and split the roots of trees Aunt Caroline had planted decades ago. I followed one of the pipe trails, snapping photos. But they weren't heading towards Summit Hollow. They were going the other direction, toward a cleared plot of land bordering the far edge of my property. Survey stakes lined the perimeter. A sign stood just beyond the fencing. "Future site, Suncrest Galleria and Wellness Plaza." They were selling my water. Not just stealing it, selling it. I returned home, hands shaking, and found a thick envelope taped to my front door. Inside was an official-looking letter from the HOA, a list of violations on my property. Overgrown grass, improper fence height, unauthorized structures. The total fine? Thousands of dollars. This wasn't miscommunication anymore. This was warfare. I stared at the rigs outside my window, their blinking lights slicing through the dark. I grabbed the easement again and reread it. 1 well. 1. No mention of post-drilling rights. Nothing about what they could or couldn't do afterward. That detail stuck with me. At dawn, I watched from the kitchen as Denise Hallbrook herself strolled onto my orchard, clipboard in hand, barking orders like she owned the place. When she saw me watching, she smiled and gave a cheery wave. My stomach turned. That was it. I called Logan Price. "Hey, I need a cement mixer." "Today. Planning a patio?" he asked. "Something like that. Also, how much concrete to fill a vertical shaft, say 8 inches wide, 40 feet deep?" He whistled. "That's oddly specific. You're going to need a lot." "What are you up to?" "Just exploring options," I replied. While I waited for Logan to deliver, I drove to hardware stores across 3 counties, buying bags of quick-set concrete at each. I didn't want any red flags from large purchases. Back home, I read the easement again. It said they could drill. It said nothing about me not filling them back in. I had just started mixing the first batch of concrete when Tanya Alvarez knocked on my door. "I heard you had some concerns about our water project," she said, trying to peek inside my garage. "That's thoughtful of you," I said, blocking her view. "Maybe you can explain why Denise said this was an emergency, while you've been planning luxury water features for months?" She hesitated. "Well, it's complicated." Tanya tried to peek around me into the garage, her tone as sugary as ever. As a member of the landscaping committee, I just wanted to clear up any confusion. "That's thoughtful," I replied, stepping into her line of sight to block her view. "Maybe you can explain why Denise told me this was an emergency when, in fact, you've been planning luxury water features for months." Tanya shifted, clearly uncomfortable. "Well, it's complicated. The drought is real, but we're also looking ahead to long-term community improvements." She lowered her voice. "Between us, the board has been collecting special assessment fees for these upgrades for years. The members would riot if we didn't deliver something spectacular. And the shopping mall?" I asked, my eyes fixed on hers. Her face went blank. "What shopping mall?" "The one they're laying pipes toward from my property. The Suncrest Galleria project." Tanya blinked. "We've never discussed anything like that. The board only talked about water features within Summit Hollow. No commercial deals, as far as I know. Interesting. The HOA board was hiding things, even from their own committees. I thanked her for stopping by and shut the door before she could press me any further. That night, I waited until 2 a.m., when the last of the drilling crews had left and the so-called security guard was snoozing in his truck. I wheeled Logan's cement mixer out of the garage and across the orchard. The air was cold, but my blood was hot. I worked quickly, mixing and pouring thick, wet concrete down the first completed shaft. The gray slurry vanished into the darkness. I added in chunks of metal scrap, old pipe segments, rusted brackets, anything I could find to make it near impossible to drill through later. By dawn, the well was sealed and camouflaged. Unless they tried to install a pump, no one would know. The next night, I did it again. Then again. For 3 nights in a row, I turned those illegal wells into hardened tombs. On the 4th morning, I was jolted awake by violent pounding at the door. Denise Holbrook stood outside with 2 men in dark suits, rage twisting her face. She didn't wait for an invitation, storming into my living room like she owned it. "We need to talk. Right now," she snapped. "Good morning to you too," I said, crossing my arms. "Our crews report that the first 3 wells have been sabotaged," she hissed. I tilted my head. "Sabotaged? How?" "Don't play dumb, Eli. Someone filled them with concrete. The drilling company can't proceed." I shrugged. "That's awful. But I don't see how that's my problem. It's your project. Your crews." She practically growled. "You're responsible for securing the site." "Actually," I replied calmly, "I never gave permission for those wells in the first place. The easement doesn't say anything about me being in charge of security." One of the men in suits stepped forward. "Martin Clay, HOA counsel. This act of vandalism has already cost us over $50,000. We'll be adding that to the list of HOA violations on your property." "Speaking of which," I interrupted, grabbing a folder from the table, "I've been photographing my land weekly. I can prove those so-called violations, like overgrown grass and fence height issues, didn't exist before your crews started tearing everything up." The second man spoke up. "Mr. Walker, I'm Investigator L. Ortega. Sabotage on this scale could be considered a felony." "That's interesting," I replied, unlocking my phone, "because I've also been documenting every interaction and activity here." I showed them photos, the piping system leading directly to the Suncrest Galleria site. Not Summit Hollow. Not the HOA. A commercial development. "Also," I added, looking squarely at Denise, "I've been recording our conversations, including when you admitted to exceeding the single well limit." Denise paled. Her composure cracked. "This is absurd," she said, her voice rising. "We have every legal right to access that aquifer for 1 emergency well." "1, I repeated. "Not 3, not 7, and definitely not for profit." The room fell into a tense silence. Investigator Ortega scribbled something in his notebook. Martin whispered urgently to Denise. And for the first time, I saw fear in their eyes. "Not 7 wells for fountains and a private lake," I corrected her, my voice steady. "And definitely not for selling water to mall developers." Martin Clay, the HOA's lawyer, leaned in and whispered something to Denise Holbrook. Her posture stiffened. She glanced at me, clearly rattled, and finally said, "Perhaps we can discuss a compromise." "I don't think so," I replied coldly. "My attorney has already filed for an emergency injunction. And just so you know, the County Water Board and the Environmental Protection Office are both extremely interested in your unauthorized aquifer access." Investigator L. Ortega, who had been quietly observing, jotted something into his notepad. "I think I need to investigate these allegations further before making any assumptions about vandalism." When they finally left, I dropped into the kitchen chair, exhausted. My hands trembled. I had stood my ground, but I knew this wasn't over. Not even close. Denise wouldn't back down easily. There was too much money riding on this. That afternoon, I spotted one of the drilling crew members across the orchard, subtly snapping photos of my garage, specifically the corner where the cement mixer was stored. A few hours later, I noticed an unfamiliar black sedan driving slowly past my house. Someone was definitely watching me. Then my phone rang. Samantha Reed. "Good news and bad news," she said without preamble. "The judge is interested in your case, but the earliest we can get a hearing is next week." I sighed. "And the bad news?" "The Summit Hollow HOA has deep ties with the county zoning board. Permits that typically take months were fast-tracked for them in a matter of days. They've got pull. So we're not just fighting the HOA, I muttered. We're fighting the system. Looks that way, Samantha agreed. We'll need solid evidence, and something to spark public outrage. After we hung up, I took a long walk around my property line, thinking. 3 wells had been filled, but 4 more were in various stages of completion. I couldn't just keep playing defense. Then I saw it. A massive tanker truck was parked next to one of the active wells, its hose buried deep in the ground. Painted on the side, Evergreen Development Corporation. I froze for half a second, then snapped several photos as it pulled away. I got in my truck and followed. It drove straight to the cleared field near the Suncrest Galleria project. Workers in hard hats were unloading the water into massive holding tanks. They weren't waiting for the permanent pipeline. They were already selling my water. I called Samantha immediately and sent her the pictures. This might be the smoking gun, she said. I'm alerting the environmental regulators now. When I returned home, Denise and Martin were parked in my driveway. We're prepared to offer compensation, Denise said, wearing a smile so fake it practically cracked. The HOA is willing to pay you $5,000 for the inconvenience. I raised an eyebrow. That's generous, considering you're selling my water for tens of thousands. Martin cleared his throat. We're also willing to waive all HOA violation fees. I'm not a member of your HOA. I reminded them. You have no authority here. The smile disappeared from Denise's face. Her eyes hardened. Listen carefully. This project will move forward, with or without you. The board has invested too much. If you continue interfering, there will be consequences. Are you threatening me? I asked calmly. I'm being realistic, she replied. We have resources and connections you can't imagine. Don't make us use them. They left without another word. Across the street, Victor Alvarez watched from his porch. He walked over slowly, his expression serious. Be careful, he warned. Denise doesn't play fair. Last year, a homeowner challenged her new landscaping rules. A week later, he was hit with building code violations that nearly ruined him. Thanks for the heads up, I said. But I'm not backing down. That night, just as I was prepping to fill another well, I heard it. Footsteps. Flashlights swept across my yard. Security guards now patrolled the property line. They weren't hiding anymore. How could I finish what I'd started with eyes on me around the clock? And what would Denise try next to crush my resistance? The stakes were higher than ever. My hands shook as I stared at the photos I had just taken. Images of my land torn up and drained. 7 wells sucking the life out of my orchard. Not 1. Not 3. 7. This wasn't just theft. It was war. And I needed a new plan, fast. The weight of it all kept me from sleeping. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with anger and helplessness. How could one man fight an entire HOA board backed by money, lawyers, and connections? At exactly 3 a.m., I sat bolt upright. I knew what I had to do. I called my cousin Logan Price, who ran a small construction business. I need a cement mixer, I whispered into the phone. No questions. Just get it here. By sunrise, we had a plan. I drove across Summit County, hitting up 3 separate hardware stores to buy quick-setting cement. I paid cash. No paper trail. No single bulk purchase to raise suspicion. Logan arrived just as the neighborhood settled into its post-rush hour quiet. He parked behind my shed, hidden from the road. He looked out across the orchard. You sure about this? I nodded, slipping on gloves. This is my land. My Aunt Caroline's legacy. They don't get to steal that from me. We started with the well furthest from the road, freshly drilled and unguarded. I mixed the cement thick, adding steel rebar and rusted metal scraps for reinforcement. The sludge gurgled as it filled the shaft, vanishing into the earth. 1 down. 6 more to go. By noon, we'd sealed 4 wells. The 5th was more difficult. They'd already installed preliminary piping. Logan helped me rip it out. Then we filled that one too. Someone's coming, Logan warned, nodding toward a dust cloud rising from the access road. Keep going, I said, mixing faster. We need to finish. As we poured the 6th well, I heard the unmistakable slam of car doors. Then came a voice I'd grown to loathe. Stop what you're doing right now. Denise Hallbrook stormed across my orchard in designer heels, each step sinking into the soft dirt. Behind her followed Trevor Cho and 2 other Summit Hollow board members. What exactly do you think you're doing? She demanded, her voice shrill with fury. I didn't even look up. Home improvement project. On our wells, she shrieked. On my land, I corrected, meeting her gaze. Wells that exceed the one emergency access point allowed under the easement. Trevor stepped forward. You have no idea who you're messing with. The HOA will bury you in legal fees. Interesting choice of words, I said, watching the cement slide into the well. Considering what I'm doing right now. Denise pulled out her phone. I'm calling the police. Please do, I said, walking to my truck. I returned with a folder full of evidence. Then you can explain why you approved 7 wells when the easement only allows 1, and why your emergency drought measures are funding a private water park for board members. Her finger froze mid-dial. What are you talking about? I handed her copies of blueprints I'd secretly photographed from Trevor's window. They clearly showed plans labeled Board Members Retreat. Trevor lunged for the documents, but Logan stepped between us. Careful, I said calmly. I also have recordings of your threats. My lawyer found them. Interesting. As the third well finished setting, Logan moved to the last one. Just then, a white county utility truck pulled up. A man in a water authority uniform stepped out, followed by a police officer. Perfect timing, I said, waving them over. I reported unauthorized aquifer drilling this morning. Denise's face turned from crimson to pale. This is a private HOA matter, she insisted. Actually, said the water authority officer, checking his clipboard, drilling into the aquifer requires specific county permits, which you don't have. Also, based on our maps, this is private property, not HOA land. The police officer stepped forward. We've received multiple reports of trespassing and property damage. Everyone, please step back. Trevor tried to explain, but his words fumbled and fell apart. The truth was catching up to them, faster than any lawsuit ever could. I stood there, breathing heavy, watching as their entire scheme began to collapse. The final well was setting beneath the hot sun, and so was their future. The final batch of cement gurgled into the 7th well, sealing it shut under the morning sun. Strangely, I felt calm. Officer, I said, turning to Investigator Ortega, I have full documentation proving the HOA exceeded their legal access to my property. As Denise Holbrook and Trevor Cho bickered with officials, Logan Price rinsed out the cement mixer behind me. Your wells are permanently closed, I told the board members, watching the last slab of cement set like stone. Just like your private water park plans. Denise shot me a look that could peel paint. This isn't over. The officer stepped between us. Ma'am, I'll need you and the board members to come with me to the station. We have several questions regarding these unauthorized wells. As they were led away, I noticed neighbors gathered near the fence line. Whispers, finger-pointing, concerned glances. For the first time, I felt something I hadn't expected, uncertainty. The cement had hardened, but the future hadn't. 3 weeks later, I woke to a news van parked outside my house. Everything had changed. My life was no longer private. Camera crews followed me when I got groceries. Some neighbors ignored me. Others left anonymous notes in my mailbox, some kind, some not. One envelope had a crudely drawn cement truck with Hero written across it. Another simply read, Traitor, you're trending online, Samantha Reed told me during our morning call. They're calling you the Cement Avenger. I groaned. All I wanted was to protect my land. Well, you did more than that, she said. The county investigation just went public. And it's big. I opened the local news website. The headline made my jaw drop. Summit Valley HOA Scandal. Fake drought used to sell water rights to developers. The article detailed how Denise and the board manufactured a water emergency to justify drilling on private land. Their goal? To redirect water to construction projects, including the upcoming Suncrest Galleria. The supposed members' only retreat was just a distraction. My phone rang nonstop that day. Reporters, lawyers, even the mayor. You need to come to tonight's emergency town hall, the mayor insisted. People want answers from you. At 7 p.m., I walked into a packed community center. The crowd quieted when I entered. To my surprise, several residents nodded respectfully. An older woman patted the seat next to her. I knew your Aunt Caroline, she whispered. She'd be proud. The meeting was chaos. Residents demanded to know where their money had gone. County officials listed violation after violation, from permit fraud to environmental damage. Then the doors slammed open. Denise Holbrook entered with her high-powered attorney, Martin Clay. This is a witch hunt, she shouted. Everything we did was for property values. You mean your bank account? Someone yelled back. Denise's eyes locked onto me. She raised her finger like a dagger. This man destroyed community infrastructure. He should be arrested. The mayor stepped in. Miss Holbrook, the county has already ruled. The wells were unauthorized. The permits were forged. Martin Clay tried to speak, but was drowned out by boos. The county water director took the microphone, holding up documents. We traced developer payments directly to Ms. Holbrook's private consulting firm. They planned to drain 23% of the aquifer in just 1 year. Had they succeeded, the damage would have been catastrophic. Gasps echoed through the hall. Suddenly, a scuffle at the back drew everyone's attention. Miranda, Cho pushed her husband Trevor toward the microphone. "Tell them," she snapped. Trevor looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Denise promised us all a cut," he admitted. "There was no drought. We made it up to justify the project." The room exploded. County officials presented more evidence: meeting minutes, financial records, fake conservation alerts. By midnight, the decision came down. Denise and 3 board members would face criminal charges. And I, Eli Walker, was no longer just the guy who poured cement into illegal wells. I was the man who helped crack open a corruption ring and protect Summit Valley's water for generations to come. With criminal charges filed, the Summit Hollow HOA charter was suspended pending a complete overhaul. I slipped out of the town hall quietly during the confusion, exhausted. The adrenaline was gone. What would happen to my land now? To my life here? 2 months passed in a blur of legal meetings, zoning hearings, and paperwork. Then, on a crisp Saturday morning, I opened my door to find a small group of neighbors waiting. Leading them was a woman with warm eyes who introduced herself as the head of the new Neighborhood Transition Committee. "We need to talk about your land," she said. My heart sank. "I'm not selling." She smiled gently. "We don't want you to sell. We came to apologize and to propose something that might help heal this community." Their plan was simple but powerful. The back portion of my 6-acre orchard, the area where the illegal wells had been drilled, would be turned into a community nature preserve. I would retain full ownership, but allow limited public access under a formal conservation easement. "And the cement?" I asked, unsure. "It stays," she said, "as a reminder of what happens when people in power forget who they're supposed to serve." I agreed. Months later, I stood at the edge of my orchard and could barely believe my eyes. Dozens of volunteers worked across the land, planting native trees, building birdhouses, laying mulch. Around each cemented well cap was a small plaque, engraved with a brief description of what had happened there and why it mattered. Miranda Cho approached with a bottle of water. Her husband, Trevor, was pulling weeds along the trail, part of his court-ordered community service. "The Water Education Center plans are finished," she said, showing me the designs for a modest building nestled near the woods. "We're naming it after Aunt Caroline, if that's all right." I nodded, watching children carefully placing river stones around a new rain garden. Nearby, a county hydrologist explained the water cycle to a group of curious students. "They say your actions save the aquifer," Miranda added quietly. "The new HOA charter includes strict protections. No board will ever be allowed to do this again." A reporter from Green Horizons magazine stood nearby, snapping photos. "Would you be willing to share your story for our next cover?" she asked. "People need to see that standing up to corruption can actually work." Before I could answer, a familiar sound rumbled down the road. Denise Holbrook's luxury SUV cruised slowly past the preserve. She no longer lived in Summit Valley. After pleading guilty to multiple counts of fraud, she'd been forced to step down. Still, she couldn't resist one last glare. Miranda sighed. She still doesn't get it. This was never about money, or fountains, or fake lakes. It was about doing what's right. That evening, we held the dedication ceremony. Neighbors gathered around the largest cemented well cap, now adorned with a polished bronze plaque. The mayor handed me a small golden key to the new education kiosk. "Sometimes," he said, his voice carrying across the orchard, "it only takes one person's courage to remind a community what it truly stands for." I looked out over what used to be a quiet, neglected field, now alive with people, purpose, and peace. Bird watchers set up scopes along the new trail. Families strolled past signs about native plants. Laughter echoed from the picnic area where children played. "I never wanted a war with my neighbors," I told the crowd. "I just wanted to protect what was mine." An elderly man near the front raised his hand. And in doing that, son, you protected what was ours too. The cement around those illegal wells had long since hardened. But something softer had taken root in the community, something stronger than resentment, respect. As twilight settled over the preserve, I walked the new gravel path that now curved gently around my private garden. Just before the tree line, someone had placed a handmade sign. Thank you for showing us the difference between taking and sharing. I smiled. Aunt Caroline would have liked that. Sometimes you have to close one door completely to open one far better.